She nodded slowly, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to say something, but no words came. He took that as his cue. With one last lingering look, his eyes burning with want and promise, he finally let go of her hand and took a step back. "Good night, love," he said softly. And then he turned to leave, hands clenching into fists at his sides, trying to ignore the way his body itched for her. He knew he wouldn't sleep tonight. He knew his dreams would be plagued with her. Her touch and her laugh and the way she gasped when he kissed her. He knew he wouldn't be able to forget just how goddamn much he wanted her. But he'd promised he'd take things slow. He'd made that promise to her. And he wouldn't break it. Not even for her. He had a feeling this was going to be the longest damn night of his life. It was. He didn't sleep a damn wink, just lay there staring at the ceiling, his body taut with tension and desire as he thought about her. Her body under his, her hands in his hair, her voice whispering his name, her lips on his skin. He groaned and pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes. Damn it all to hell. He was losing it. He knew damn well that thinking about her only made it worse, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't forget the feel of her in his arms, the taste of her lips, the sound she'd made when he touched her. Gods, she'd been like a drug, a goddamn addiction. He'd always thought that saying was bullshit. But damn if it didn't apply to her. He was addicted to her, and tonight was going to be absolute hell. Finally, in desperation, he grabbed his wand and muttered a silencing charm around his bed. Then he gave in. He closed his eyes and let the memories flood him. Her touch, her taste, the heat of her skin beneath his fingers. His hand slipped under the covers. It was nowhere close to the real thing, but the memory of her alone was enough to drive him crazy. He closed his eyes and remembered how she'd felt underneath him, his hands in her hair, her body arching up into his. A low groan escaped from his lips. Bloody hell, Scarlet. He kept his movements slow, savoring each one, letting himself be consumed by the memory of her. The way she'd moaned into his mouth, the way her fingers had tangled in his hair, the heat of her skin as he kissed down her neck. God, he wanted to taste that spot again, needed to feel it beneath his lips. He bit back another whimper, trying to keep his pace slow. He wanted to make this last, remember every damn moment. But it was impossible. He was too far gone, too goddamn desperate to think straight. His fingers curled into the sheets as he remembered how her hands had felt on his skin, how she'd gasped and arched against him, how she'd whispered his name like a goddamn prayer. Scarlet! Oh, sweetheart, you're killing me! His hips rocked against his hand, his body straining with the need to go faster, to take what he wanted. But he forced himself to keep it slow, to draw out every last shiver and gasp and shudder that he could. God, he wanted to see her face. He wanted to hear her gasp his name like that, and know that he'd been the one who made her feel that way. Bloody hell, you make me crazy, he whispered, his voice low and ragged. And then, with a low cry muffled by the silencing charm, he came, his body arching off the bed as wave after wave of pleasure crashed over him. He collapsed back against the sheets, breathing hard and heart-pounding. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough, he just needed her. Only her. He lay there in the dark, sweat cooling on his skin, breath still ragged. His hand slowly fell away from where it had been, and for a long moment he just stared up at the canopy of his bed. The silence pressed in around him like a weight. It wasn't fair, no matter how much he wanted her or remembered her or needed her, she was still asleep in another tower. Untouchable. And gods, he was so damn addicted to her it hurt to think straight. His fingers twitched against the sheets, already craving more of what they'd never truly have until she gave herself back to him completely again. But he wouldn't do anything more tonight. He'd made the promise of being a gentleman, and he wouldn't break it no matter how much it killed him, no matter how much he wanted her. So, with a shuddery breath, he rolled onto his side, pulling the covers up over his still naked body, and tried to ignore the ache of desire still throbbing through him. As he stared into the darkness, the words he'd said to her the other night echoed in his mind. You're the only damn addiction I need. God, it was true. No amount of alcohol or smokes or dangerous stunts would ever do the trick the way she did. She'd ruined him for everything else. Hell, he was pretty damn sure he'd be ruined if he had to go another night without her. With a final shuddering breath, he squeezed his eyes closed. He'd never sleep tonight, not without her. Sweetheart, he whispered, his voice ragged. I need you like I need to goddamn breathe. But she wasn't with him, not now. She was in another tower, in a different bed, probably fast asleep. And he was here, alone and aching with desire for her. He'd meant it when he said he needed her, and it didn't matter how goddamn pathetic that made him. The more time he went without her, the more those old fears and doubts started creeping in. She'll leave. She'll find someone better. Someone less broken and more worth her damn time. Someone who's good enough for her. He clenched his jaw, pushing the thoughts down. No. He couldn't go back to that place again. She'd come back, she'd kissed him, she'd called him her forever. That had to mean something, had to be enough. But still, the old fear lingered. The one that whispered she was too damn good for him. And he'd lose her again before he could even really have her. It was early morning when Draco came back from his late-night patrol. He paused at the foot of Mattheo's bed, frowning slightly at the silencing charm still in place. Then he heard it, a soft, broken whisper cutting through the spell like a knife. "Scarlet," Draco sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Gods help them both. A week passed. Each day, Mattheo's addiction for her only strengthened, the need to touch her a constant ache that nothing seemed to fill. Not smoke, not drinks. Damn, he'd even given the dangerous stunts a break in case that would somehow appease the cravings, but nothing worked. She'd always been like a drug to him, and he was hopelessly, irreversibly hooked. Which meant these last few days had been hell. He kept his promise, though, being a gentleman, holding back, not rushing her into anything. But damn if it wasn't killing him. Every time she smiled at him, every time she brushed against his hand in the corridor, every time her laughter rang through the common room like music, he wanted to break. Wanted to take her then and there against the wall or on the sofa or across some abandoned desk. But he didn't, because he'd promised. And God's help him, he'd keep that promise if it killed him first. It was the weekend, which meant no classes. It was also a Hogsmeade weekend. And Mattheo had to fight every damn instinct in his body not to ask her to spend the day with him. Because if he'd been antsy as hell just being around her, spending the day alone with her was going to push him well over the edge. And he wasn't sure he could fight his instincts when the two of them were alone for an entire day. So he forced himself to stay inside the castle, knowing it would be safer to be away from her. But still, he couldn't get her off his mind. He could imagine her out in Hogsmeade, laughing, shopping, walking through the falling snow. And gods, how he wanted to be there with her. He wanted to hold her hand through the village, wanted to buy her hot chocolate, wanted to pull her into some secluded spot and kiss her breathless in the snow. He stayed in the common room, trying to distract himself. He attempted to focus on his transfiguration homework, but damn, it was hard. Every sound, a laugh, a creaching stare, a passing student, sounded like it could be her. His eyes darted up every damn time, his heart giving that stupid, hopeful lurch, and every damn time it was just a student or something else entirely, not her. Eventually, he just gave up and tossed his homework aside. He spent the next few hours lying on the couch by the fireplace trying to clear his head. But it was useless. Every time he shut his eyes, he was assaulted with memories and images of her, laughing, smiling, crying, whispering his name. He shifted on the sofa, letting out a quiet, frustrated growl. He could feel his body starting to ache for her again. An ache that was only getting worse and worse the longer he went without touching her. Finally, he stood up, running a shaking hand through his hair. He needed to move, needed to get out of the common room before he did something stupid like show up in Hogsmeade just to watch her from a distance. He paced a few steps, clenching and unclenching his hands. He was desperate. He needed something, anything to distract himself from the memories and the need and the aching desire. Something to let him breathe. And then an idea occurred to him, so simple and obvious he wondered why he hadn't thought of it sooner. It wasn't the most noble of distractions, and it certainly wasn't something he'd ever thought he'd be doing. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and there was no denying that it would be a damn effective distraction. So, before he could talk himself out of it, he turned and strode out the portrait hole. He made his way through the castle, avoiding any students still lounging in the halls. It wasn't long before he reached the astronomy tower. But he wasn't here to stargaze or brood. No, there was something else on his mind entirely. He pulled out his wand and murmured a quick locking charm on the door behind him. The last thing he needed was someone walking in on this. Not that the astronomy tower was busy, often still. He wasn't risking it. With the door locked, he tucked his wand back into his pocket. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the way his heart was already beating slightly faster. Get it together, he told himself. It's just a distraction. Nothing more. With that, he leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes and letting out a shaky breath. It took all his willpower not to think of her, not to imagine her hair, her eyes, her laugh, her hands, her body, the way her skin felt under his touch. He shook his head. Distraction, he reminded himself. He took another slow, measured breath, trying to center himself. And then, with a soft groan, he let his hand slip beneath his belt. He didn't rush it, took his time letting his hand move slowly, almost lazily, over himself. He tried not to imagine her hands, her lips, the way her voice would sound when she whispered his quiet, breathless moments. Distraction, he repeated. Over and over, like a mantra. Distraction. Just a distraction. But as he worked his hand back and forth, breathing in sharply through his teeth, it was harder to keep those images away. The memories were just there, whispering in his ear, reminding him just how good it had feels when her body was pressed against his. How she'd felt against his lips, her hair splayed across that damn pillow. Just a distraction, he said one more time, but deep down, he was no longer sure he even believed it anymore. His breathing was getting more ragged now, his body already starting to tighten. The memories were flooding him, the image of her face seared into his mind like a brand. He tried to shut them out again, but it wasn't working. All he could see were her eyes, her lips, her smile, the feel of her body, the taste of her skin. Gods, he never wanted anything more in his life. He was close now. He couldn't keep himself from closing his eyes in that moment, and he was assaulted with memories of her face, the way her lips felt against his, the sound of her moans in his ear, how his name had sounded on her tongue when she'd whispered it against his skin. It was too much. He couldn't keep fighting it. He didn't want to fight it anymore. He needed her. He shuddered, her name slipping past his lips in a ragged whisper. He'd promised himself he wasn't going to do this, but he was past caring about promises now. Scarlet, gods, please. He'd give anything, everything, to feel her again. To taste her, hear her, hold her. Please, please, damn it. He was right on the damn edge. Please, he whispered again. Please, sweetheart. Please, I need you. And then, just as he was about to break, he finally let go. A cry tore from his lips, muffled by the silencing charm around the room as his body arched and shuddered. He'd been wrong. This wasn't a distraction. She was all he thought about. She was what brought him over that damn edge, and nothing else mattered at all. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard and shaky and trying to calm his racing heart. He'd thought it would make him feel better. He'd thought it would help. It didn't. In fact, it just made everything so bloody worse. He wanted her, needed her, and he didn't care how desperate it made him, not that it wasn't painfully obvious by now. God damn it, he whispered hoarsely. He stayed there for a moment longer, catching his breath and slowly coming back down from the high. Then, with a quiet sigh, he straightened up and adjusted his clothes. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. She was out there, somewhere, and soon she'd be back in the castle. And when she was, he had to be strong enough to keep that promise again. But gods help him. How the hell was he supposed to do it? He took another deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. Pull it together, you idiot, he told himself. She'll be back soon, and when she is, just be strong. Be a damn gentleman. Don't let yourself lose control, no matter how bad you want to. With that, he adjusted his clothes one last time and turned to leave the astronomy tower. It was still snowing out, the ground covered in a fresh blanket of white, the castle looked almost fairy tale-like. It would have been beautiful if he'd been with anyone else. As it was, it just felt like a cruel taunt. He kept his gaze forward, not letting his eyes drift to the gate, even though every fiber of his body ached to look for her. He froze the second he saw her, standing there in the snow, her dark brown hair dusted with white flakes, cheeks flushed from the cold, blue eyes searching for him. His breath caught. She came back early. She looked for him. All his promises, the restraint he'd been clinging to like a lifeline, shattered in that one moment. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He crossed the courtyard in 3 long strides, his heart hammering so hard it felt like it might rip out of his chest. And then he cupped her face in both hands and kissed her, not gentle, not careful, no holding back this time, hard, desperate, starving, like a man who had been drowning and just found air, but even then she wasn't enough to save him from how deep he'd sunk without her.